What makes a good horror movie? In this guy's opinion, John Carpenter, I guess. In my opinion, probably also John Carpenter, but also atmosphere, mood. Mostly those two. When I was a kid, a horror movie that I loved, that even when I look back on now I realize wasn't that good, was The Howling.
The Howling. Somewhere in this city, in this human jungle, it begins.
From 1981, 80? No, not 1981, 80, just 1980. 80? Yeah, sure, let's go with that. The reason The Howling always stuck with me was probably because I watched it in my grandma's house when I was a kid, and my grandma lived in a 2-story wooden house that sat atop a hill with another hill next to it that was covered in trees. It was prime horror movie watching experience. It was so perfect. But really what captured my imagination was always the creepiness of the forest. Even in the daytime scenes, it still felt like something was off, man. And I feel like that is reinforced in the movie when we have, characters walking through the forest and you hear like cracking of like the branches, and then obviously we get the big scene in Eddie's cabin. I think The Howling sort of speaks to a thing about horror movies and horror movie fandom in general, is that maybe they don't need to be the best movies in the world for you to go, oh wow, that made me feel something. I think of some of my favorite horror movies, and they're probably not 10 out of 10s. I mean, Lake Mungo, which, unless you're Australian and unless you know, like, the Dead Meat podcast, you've got no fucking idea what Lake Mungo is. Or the original version of this. I mean, the original Halloween probably is a 10 out of 10, but there's still plenty of, bumps. It's not technically perfect, but the way it makes you feel, the way Haddonfield, feels like this 3D space that you're in, and it feels eerie to be there, and it feels unsettling. So the reason that I'm talking about this, and the reason that I'm bringing The Howling up, is because it spawned my adoration for horror and horror media in general, and some of the best memories I've had in my life. And so I thought I would share my thoughts on horror movies, share my thoughts on what horror means to me. And so if you enjoy hearing me ramble on like an idiot, I might make more of these, or I fucking might not. What is the best horror movie theme? Now, there's no real definitive answer, because horror movies across the board tend to have great music. Oh my god. Like, we're talking about Jaws, if you count that as a horror movie, which you absolutely should. We're talking Halloween. We're talking Nightmare on Elm Street. We're talking, The Shining. We're talking, The Thing. Not the thing, like, not just anything. I mean, The Thing, like John Carpenter's The Thing. Basically, any John Carpenter movie. I am such a John Carpenter fanboy that dude could just slap a piano with his hand and I would be like, oh my god, this is the greatest thing since Beethoven. For me, music in horror movies is like one of, if not the most essential element next to like mood and atmosphere. Something about good horror movie music, it just hits you like in your core, man. I mean, that opening of The Shining, where they're driving up the hills up to the overlook, and you've just got the bwam, 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 bwam. I absolutely fucking nailed that. But it fills you with this, like, feeling of anticipation, like, something about it just hits you in your core and it unsettles you, and you're like, oh fuck, like, what are we in for? Same with my favorite horror movie, Halloween.
Halloween. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
I think every piece of music in Halloween is excellent. It's eerie, it's creepy, and if it's not either of those things, then it still brings you into the world of Haddonfield. I mean, I've nailed that one as well. This video could just be me, like, talking about Halloween's music, to be honest. You know, the Shape Stalks. I think it's the Shape Stalks, but you know, the dun, 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 dun. Oh my god, it's so good. And I mean, John Carpenter across the board, man. I mean, if you look at The Thing has one of the most subtle and nuanced themes in probably all of horror, and yet it just sticks in your head and you like feel it in your heart, and it's just this low rumbling dun 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 dun. It's so good that The Descent ended up ripping it off in 2005, which is a thing no one ever talks about. Is that song publicly licensed? I have no fucking idea. It doesn't matter, I guess. It doesn't matter. Like I said before, some might not consider Jaws to be a horror movie, but if it's not a horror movie, it's at least horror adventure. I mean, you can't look at that scene of Bruce under the water, the shots above looking down, and he's about to eat that guy that was in the boat, and tell me that that's not fucking horror, because that was... oh boy! But Jaws has some of the most obviously, no one needs to say this again, but I'm going to, some of the most iconic music ever? Dun 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 dun. Similarly to, like I was saying with The Howling, is that horror movies tend to have certain things that just impact you a lot more than most other movies. Something about horror movie music in particular just really, I don't know, it kind of hits you in a way that a lot of music in movies doesn't really. I mean, obviously in like superhero blockbusters, when you hear like the Avengers theme, that bam 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 bam, obviously you feel, you know, pretty excited. Like most good or most decent horror movies that have a great score backing them, you might not be that invested in the movie, you might not be really loving it, but it makes you feel something. Like, if it doesn't make you completely unsettled, it makes you enthralled, even if the movie's not that good. I mean, there's a horror movie that people love, that I personally don't, which is Hereditary. I don't really like Hereditary, but my god, I would be an idiot if I said the music in that movie wasn't absolutely engrossing. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And that's something I'll always take away from that movie, is even if I didn't like the movie on the whole that much, I'd be an idiot to say that that music doesn't make me feel like unsettled and off-put. Like, the music in Hereditary, it like hits you in the head like it's a pole. Because the... And I think maybe the test with horror movie music is if you could put an incredible theme over the most mundane of things, and it's still... I bit my tongue. And if it still unsettles you, then it's clearly doing something right. Which may mean that, hey, you don't actually have to make a good movie to unsettle people, you just have to have good music. But it is the reason why music should never be, ever be underrated in horror movies, because it's arguably one of, if not the most essential element in making an eerie atmosphere. And like The Thing, you don't even have to have an overpowering, really grandiose kind of theme. It can be subtle. And it can be subtle enough that you play it a bit and then just completely cut it off and it's silence. And that silence hits you as well, because you're so used to hearing this constant theme, and then when it cuts off, you're like, what the fuck is gonna happen? Oh my god, I just remembered. The Howling has some great music, even though it doesn't really fit a horror movie, but because of that, it actually kind of works. It's this operatic kind of, and it like, for some reason, you just feel like, oh, this is fucked up. That one always unsettled me because it was like this ghostly operatic kind of, you know, background theme in a werewolf movie. I don't know, something about that always sort of unsettled me. There's also another theme which is played a lot during the daytime, and including like the daytime sort of chase scene, that for some reason, again, it's so like full on, but it always creeped me out because it felt so ill-fitting. It didn't feel like it fit in a werewolf movie, and that actually worked for it. It actually made me go, what's gonna happen? Like, this doesn't feel right. And that not feeling right is fun. I like my horror to be fun in the sense that when I watch it and it creeps me out, I go, oh, that's That's creepy. I like that. That's good. Instead of going, oh, I've just watched someone like have their mouth taped to another person's ass. I'm not really feeling this. Also, another aspect of horror movie music that I love is when it feels really like low quality and like staticky and like kind of fucked, because like when you hear it, you're like, oh, this feels wrong. Like it wasn't edited to perfection. It's not clean. It's not perfect. It's not cut amazingly. It's not even edited into the film perfectly. But because of that, you're like, is this supposed to be here? And that feeling of, is this supposed to be here, kind of makes you like feel like unease. Like you go, oh, this is weird. Again, it's that feeling. It's that feeling of, is this like, this doesn't feel right. Why does this feel weird? So anyway, that's my like brief thoughts on horror movie music. I don't know. What's your favorite horror movie theme? Is it The Descent, where they just take off the theme from The Thing? In which case...